So, how many of you love dinosaurs? Yeah, the vast majority of kids actually love dinosaurs, and they hear lots of stories about dinosaurs. And unfortunately, most of those stories are not entirely accurate. Okay, so we'd like to clear up some of those misconceptions that we have, and we're going to talk about dinosaurs and the Bible today. Okay? So how many of you have heard that dinosaurs lived millions and millions of years ago?
I've heard, but it's not true.
Yeah, everybody, right? And how many of you have heard that no person has ever seen a dinosaur? Yeah. So these are the two most common misconceptions that people have, because they're written in all the textbooks, and all of the children's books, and all the books on dinosaurs. However, you know what? The Bible tells a different story. All right? So what's more believable? Somebody who is guessing about what they thought happened in the past, or somebody who was actually there and wrote it down?
Guessing.
That's right.
Not guessing. That is the wrong answer.
That's right. And who wrote the Bible? Anyone know? That's right. So God wrote the Bible, and He's been here from the very beginning. Okay? So the only one who's actually seen the entire history of the earth is God, and He wrote it down for us in the Bible. Okay? And so the goal for us today is to actually believe the story that the Bible tells us about the dinosaurs. Okay? All right. So this first picture, okay, now does anyone know if the word dinosaur appears in the Bible? Actually, no, the word dinosaur does not appear in the Bible. Does anyone know why? Okay, the word dinosaur was not invented until about 1859, okay? So that's almost 2,000 years after almost the entirety of the Bible was written, okay? And a lot more time since the Old Testament was written, okay? So the word dinosaur doesn't appear in the Bible because it wasn't actually invented yet, okay? But there were other words that people used to describe dinosaurs, okay? Has anyone heard of dragons? Yeah, so dragon is actually a common term for large lizards, which before the term dinosaur was invented was actually used, and there are dragon legends all over the world where people have seen dragons, which were probably dinosaurs, okay? Here's a description from the Bible. It says, "Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on the grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins or in its hips, okay? What power in the muscles in its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar, and the sinews in its thighs are close-knit. The bones are tubes of bronze, and its limbs are like rods of iron." Okay, it ranks first among the works of God. So this is a brontosaurus. It's actually the largest creature that we have ever known, right? So maybe that's what God is talking about when He says that it's first among the works of God, okay? Also, I'm glad, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon in the land of dinosaurs, because if their limbs are like iron, I'm out of a job, okay? But just because the actual word dinosaur doesn't appear in the Bible doesn't mean that they're not talking about dinosaurs and that dinosaurs weren't around, all right? People have made the argument that this verse is actually talking about an elephant. However, if you look here, it says its tail sways like a cedar. Does anyone know what a cedar is? That's right, it's a large tree. Has anyone seen an elephant's tail? That's right, does it look like a large tree? No, whereas this sauropod dinosaur has a very large tail that is much more like... Yeah, that card. Excellent. All right, so I just wanted you to know that even though the Bible may not say the word dinosaur, there are descriptions of this one called Behemoth and other creatures that probably are referring to dinosaurs. All right. Now let's talk about creation. Has everyone learned about creation in the Bible? Yeah. So how many days did it take God to create the universe and everything in it?
100.
That's right. So it is a little bit of a trick question. 6 would be the correct answer. Okay? So now there were 7 days of creation, but remember that God rested on the 7th day and didn't actually do any work. So everything was done by day 6. All right, and let's go through these really quick. Who can tell me what happened on the first day of creation? Yes. That's right, he created light and darkness, right? All right, and you all are going to get a copy of this paper and a bunch of crayons if you want to go back and color it later, okay? But remember what each of these days are for. All right, so on the first day, he created light and darkness. Does anyone know what happened on the second day? It's not the land and the water. He actually created the atmosphere in the water, okay? The atmosphere is the air. It's the air that we breathe, okay? So the second day was actually atmosphere and water, okay? So you can see it here. You got clouds and water. All right, who knows what happened on day 3?
You made the up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Separated the earth from the water, right?
He separated the land and the water, correct. So on day 3, he basically, since the water was already here, he created land, and then he separated the land from the water. What else happened on day 3? That's right, he made plants. So all the plants are created on day 3 as well. Okay, so that's this picture right here. All right, how about day 4? Mm-hmm.
He created the sun and the darkness and the land, giving some oxygen.
Very close. So day 4, he said he gave us a light for the day and a light for the night. So we would interpret that as the sun is the light for the day, right? And the moon being the light for the night. What else lights up in the night?
Stars.
Stars, that's right. So the day 4 is the sun, the moon, and all the stars.
And the night light.
And the night light. All right, day 5.
And it's a star.
Go ahead.
Day 5, he created the birds.
And birds and what else? And what? That's right, all the sea creatures and all the birds on day 5, okay? All right, oh, I forgot to even ask. So on day 3, plants were created, and on day 4, the sun was created. Anyone see a problem with that?
No. Plants need the sun to grow.
That's right, plants need the sun to grow and live, okay? So some people will try and tell you that each one of these days of the Bible represents thousands or millions of years.
The sun is a star.
So if it was one day, right, the plants could probably survive without the sun, don't you think? How about if it was 1,000 years?
No.
Yeah, probably not, right? All right. Same thing, what do the plants need to reproduce more plants? They need rain. What else? They need birds and insects to pollinize, right? So when were birds and insects? That's right, day 5, but the plants were there since day 3. And again, if that's more than 2 days, if it's 2,000 years, 2 million years, 2 millennia, whatever, we're going to have a problem, right? So he outlined the very specific days of which everything was made for a reason, okay? All right, and who can tell me what happened on day 6? So he created humans, right? Adam and Eve. What else did he make on day 6? That's right, all the land animals. Who thinks that dinosaurs are included in all those land animals? That's right, yeah. So all animals that live on land, reptiles, dinosaurs among them, would have been created on day 6 right along with people, okay? So this is the way that God describes the creation of the earth and everything that's in it, okay? And so it's important that we remember that when you hear stories that don't match with what the Bible said, because who was the only one there when all this was created?
God.
Yeah, God was the only one there, and he was the only one, so he's the only one who knows, and therefore his word is what we should be believing, okay? All right, so now, what else did God say about the animals that he created? So he created them after their own kind, okay? So remember, when animals have babies, they have babies that resemble their own kind, right? Dogs only have more dogs, cats only have more cats, horses more horses. What about dinosaurs? That's right, so dinosaurs only had more dinosaurs. And just like we can separate all of our animals today into groups, we can separate dinosaurs into groups, okay? There are 5 major classes of dinosaurs, okay? And here they are. The first one's called Thriophora, or armored dinosaurs, okay? How many of you have an armored dinosaur card in your hand? So look at the card you got, take a look at the dinosaur, and does it look like this Stegosaurus we have pictured up here with plates and horns and things to protect it? All right, if you have an armored dinosaur card, please make your way up here to the Thriophora sign.
Come on out.
Mine's a bird-like. See? This is classification or...
If you're not sure what you have, ask an adult.
So if you're not sure, wait till the end and we will classify you. No.
This is classification.
Yeah.
Dearborn.
No.
Dearborn.
Okay.
Oh, God.
All right, we'll move on.
Yep.
So the next ones are called sauropods. So these are the really big dinosaurs, or sauropod means long-necked dinosaur. Okay, these are things like your brontosaurus and really large dinosaurs. Okay, so if you have a long-necked dinosaur or a sauropod, make your way up to the sauropod sign.
Yep, that's right.
All of these dinosaurs walked on 4 legs. Okay. No, he walks on 2 legs. We're coming to you. Okay.
4 legs.
You're over there.
Long neck, 4 legs.
He does have long necks, but he only walks on 2 legs. Okay. So we're coming to you in a second. Okay. All right. The next one are the ornithopods, or bird-like dinosaurs. Bird-like can be a little confusing. They're classified as bird-like because they have basically 3 toes and they end up walking on a bird-like foot. So some of these have 2 legs, some have 4. They tend to have a more beak-type structure in their face, okay? So if you have ornithopod or bird-like dinosaurs, then go ahead and move up there. That's you.
That's a lot of them.
Yes, you're over there with on the far side. Okay? All right, the next one is called Ceratopsia, named after the Triceratops. Okay, these are also known as horned-faced dinosaurs. Okay, so if you have a dinosaur with a horn on its face, make your way over to this sign right here. All right, and the last one is everyone's favorite class of dinosaurs. Okay, so these are called the theropod dinosaurs. Okay, this is T-Rex, Velociraptors, everything depicted in Jurassic Park is almost exclusively a theropod dinosaur. So if you have theropods that are actually known because they walk on 2 legs, so if you have a large dinosaur that walks on 2 legs, make your way over to this sign. All right, do we have everybody? All right, and I need 1 volunteer. Is everyone in their right category? Okay. Yes, so 1 volunteer, come on over here. Youth flag football champions, these are going to be very dear to my heart, so we'll just pick it. Okay? All right, can you read? Okay, so what is the first category? So all of your cards have these same categories, so we're going to kind of go through that real quick. What's it say?
Math, 500 kilograms.
Okay. So mass, 500 kilograms. Does anyone? So do we know the dinosaur's mass, or are we guessing at the dinosaur's mass? That's right. Does anyone have a scale so where we can pick out, have the dinosaur step on the scale and we can weigh it accurately? No, right? We have their bones, right? So we are guessing at their size, and therefore we're taking a guess at their mass. Okay? All right. What's the next category? Okay. The next category is length. All right. So, does anyone, do we know their length, or are we guessing at their length? No, we know their length, right? We know, based on their bone structure, about how big they are, right? Plus or minus a couple inches or feet on one side or the other, okay? But length is actually something we can know from bones. Okay, can I have another volunteer? All right, so what is the next category? We're gonna go to age, okay? So, do we know how old the dinosaurs are? No, right? Because none of us were there when they were around, and history does not record when they were. So, if you see the age of a dinosaur, people are guessing, right? They're guessing based on how deep in the rock layers they are buried, but nobody actually knows the age of the dinosaurs. Let's just read the last two. What is the second to last one? Okay, so she says habitat. Does everyone see where it says habitat? Yeah, what is a habitat? Habitat's where you live, right? Do you live in the jungle? Do you live in the desert? Do we know where the dinosaurs live, or are we guessing? That's right, we are guessing, right? We were guessing based on the plants that are around them and that sort of thing, but we actually don't know what type of environment they live in. Right? And what is the last category? Giant. And what is yours? Do we know that, or do we think that? That's right, we think that, right? We don't actually know what the dinosaurs ate. And in fact, Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 says that all dinosaurs in the beginning before the fall of man were vegetarians. Did you know that? All the dinosaurs at some point were vegetarians. Okay? So, you got to keep in mind whenever you learn something about dinosaurs, you have to ask the question, do we know that, or do we think that, right? Do we know that based on what we see in front of us? What do the bones tell us, right? Or do we think that based on what shape the bones are, what type of plants are around it, that sort of thing. Does that make sense? Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the dinosaurs right now? All right, so let's have, we have coloring sheets for you all in the back, so if you want to move back that way, you can do our coloring activity about the days of creation. So, okay. All right, so we're going to talk about dinosaurs, fossils, and rock layers. And again, really more how it relates to evolution in the Bible, okay? What are you all being taught about how fossils form, why we have rock layers on the earth, and what happened to the dinosaurs? Someone tell me what they learned in school? Go ahead.
Wait, do we get to keep these?
They're extinct if they tell you why. An asteroid landed on the Earth, blew a whole bunch of dirt in the air, and it covered the dinosaurs. Is that the current story? Go ahead.
No, a volcano erupted. It killed all the dinosaurs. Then they erupted.
Okay, and what deposited those rock layers over millions of years?
Flowing water, just carrying sediment wherever.
Flowing water, okay? Okay, weathering and erosion. Okay. All right. All right, so we're actually going to talk about how things got buried, okay? And then we're going to talk about when they were buried, and finally we're going to talk about who the dinosaurs are buried with and what that tells us about our past, okay? So, number one, how they were buried. When you're talking about flowing water and sediment, that's actually more than likely correct. Again, none of us were there, None of us know, so we never know exactly.
Freaked me out because I was so
We don't know exactly, okay, what happened to all the dinosaurs. There's no way for us to know exactly how all those rock layers formed. We are making educated guesses based on what we read in the Bible, number one. Scientists are making educated guesses based on what they're observing, okay, and they're guessing about what happened in the past. And I will argue, okay, that nothing in geology, rock layers, millions of dead things buried in layers of rock all over the earth, explains that better than a catastrophic flood of Noah described in Genesis 6 and 7. Okay? Everything makes sense when you count the flood. Nothing really makes sense without the flood. And let's keep that in mind. Okay? But in order for a fossil to form, that animal has to be buried quickly and completely. Look at, and this picture doesn't come through very well on the sheet, but that top fossil is actually one fish eating another. Okay? And this bottom fossil is one water-based dinosaur giving birth to another. Like a snapshot in time, these were frozen, okay, in the process of being eaten or giving birth, okay? So what possibly could basically take a snapshot of when those animals were living and as they died and preserve it for us to see thousands to however many years later, right? So you have to bury that organism completely, right? What happens if the organism isn't buried completely and within a very quick period of time? Yeah. That's right. Anyone seen the Discovery Channel? What happens to the animals if they die, right? Vultures come in and then you have bacteria and it decays very, very quickly, right? So if there's any part of that animal that's exposed, it's going to decay and go away, and therefore it isn't around long enough to form a fossil, okay? Same thing, the fossil has to be buried completely, right? Any of it's exposed, that decay process is going to occur, right? And this becomes a problem if you don't believe in the flood, because how is all of that sediment accumulating if you don't have a large body of water and this large amount of sediment covering millions of animals all over the earth, okay? The other thing is, it has to be, again, very completely, I'm sorry this doesn't project as well as we can, but in the middle here, neither did my pointer, but this is a tree, okay? And there are layers and layers and layers of rock. There's actually a coal seam right here, okay, and a coal seam right here. And in the book that we got this from, it actually says that those coal seams are dated as 10 million years apart. Now, who thinks that this tree was there for 10 million years, enough to deposit enough rock for this entire tree to be separated by two coal seams 10 million years apart? Yeah, no way, right? All of these rock layers, okay, have to be deposited in a short period of time. They have to bury that entire organism, in this case a tree, in order for it to be fossilized in one period of time, okay? So you have to remember that. These are called polystyrate fossils. They're found all over the earth, and they cross several rock layers, which, if you were to believe a geologist, would be millions and millions of years of geologic time, okay? However, if it were a flood with a lot of sediment at one time, and you covered the entire tree, that would more accurately explain why we see these polystyrate fossils all over the earth. All right. So again, like I said before, only the flood explains how come we have millions of dead things buried in sedimentary layers all over the earth. And I will tell you, those same layers are found everywhere from Colorado to Montana to Europe and China. Okay, the same layers of rock should be found all over the earth. Okay, so some people say that there must have been a local flood. There was a flood in a certain area. It had to cover all the animals, and therefore we get fossils. This picture down here, okay, these are giant oysters. Anyone know where we found those giant oysters? We found them high up in the Andes Mountains at 19,000 feet. Anyone climb a 14er in Colorado? Yeah, so Colorado, our highest mountains are 14,000 feet. In South America, they're at 19,000 feet. Okay, and they're giant oysters at 19,000 feet in South America. There are also marine invertebrates found in the exposed rock of Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. So we know, just like the Bible says, that the entire earth at one time was covered with water. All right? out of Genesis. The waters prevailed mightily on the earth, that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered, covering them 15 cubits deep. Cubits about the length of your arms. We're talking at least 30 feet of water over the highest mountains in all the world. Okay? Just like the Bible said. All right. So if we know how fossils are made, let's talk a little bit about when they were made. All right. So this is a cutout from a textbook closer to my era, but I don't think they've changed a whole lot. But again, the Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Now let's play the same game we did with the dinosaurs. Do we know that or do we think that? All right? Right, so what can we actually observe here? Are there rock layers? Do we know that or do we think that? We know that, okay? How about the river? Is the river at the bottom of the canyon? Yeah, so we know that. Do we know how long it took that river in the canyon to form? No. Okay, so everything else is just guessing. In the case of the Grand Canyon, we can actually measure that it goes down, you know, half an inch, quarter of an inch a year, right? We can measure the total distance to the top, and then we can guess, if that were occurring the whole time, how long it took to form that canyon. But that would be just a guess, and we don't know. I would suggest there's a more reasonable explanation. For those of you who are a little bit older, and you know, so this is a picture of Mount St. Helens. Anyone know what happened in 1980 to Mount St. Helens? That's right, it was a volcano and it erupted. All right, so this is what happened to Mount St. Helens in 1980. Okay, the entire side of that mountain was blown out by the volcano, and it put all of this dirt and ash into the air. Okay, and then it came down, and guess what it formed? Rock layers, right? But initially, those rock layers aren't solid; they're very soft. It's like sand. All right, and you can imagine. Does anyone? Well, so we're going to compare. So this is the Toutle River, just near Mount St. Helens in Washington, and this is the Grand Canyon. Okay, does anyone think they look pretty similar? That's not fire. So yeah, so you have very steep canyon cliffs. You've got a river at the bottom, and you've got these layers of rocks. Okay, for both canyons. So we're told that the Grand Canyon took millions of years to form. Any guesses on how long it took to form the Toutle River Canyon in Washington?
A billion years.
That's what you're going to be told. Guess what? Because the volcano is there, and there are all kinds of scientists there now observing it, guess what? We actually observed this canyon form in its entirety in 9 hours. Okay? It took 9 hours for that canyon to form. And you all know this. Has anyone been to the beach and tried to build up a sand wall to keep the waves from going back, the water from going back into the water?
Yes.
Right? How does that work?
Not so good.
Not very well, right? That sand, when it is soft, right, the water cuts right through it, right? Has anyone tried to put a rock Has anyone put a rock there and been able to dam up the water with a rock? Yeah. How about the dams we have around here? Chatfield, Cherry Creek. What makes up those dams? Sand? Rock, right? So rock, once it's solidified, does not erode at the same rate that it does when it's soft, when it's first formed or not solidified. So it makes sense that this newly formed sedimentary rock, or rock layers formed by the volcano, right? Since that rock was still soft, when the water broke through and ran through, it actually formed that deep canyon in a very short amount of time. Here's another canyon, again, adjacent to Mount St. Helens. Same big rock layers, right? Just like the Grand Canyon, very deep cliffs. Guess how long this one took to form?
6 years.
Darn it. All right, so it doesn't take millions of years, okay, for the rocks to form, and it certainly doesn't take millions of years for rivers to cut canyons in those rock layers, especially if they haven't been allowed to settle yet, right? So you can imagine after the flood, there was a lot of water that had to run off, right? Okay, and so it makes more sense that as the water ran off from the flood, they carved these deep canyons that we find all over the world. All right? Does anyone have any questions about that formation? All right, so let's go on. So, does anyone know what this is? What these are? Now, I'm actually throwing you a curveball. Okay, these are actually red blood cells. Okay, and this is actually a blood vessel. Okay? Has anyone ever, like, maybe been in a fight with their sibling, got a bloody nose and blood all over their driveway? Yeah, how long did that blood stay in the driveway? Was it gone within a week? Maybe a month? Right? So blood, when it's exposed, actually doesn't stick around very long. All right? How about, you see these pictures on the Discovery Channel of like all these vultures and stuff, as they break down dead animals and they decompose. Think there's any blood vessels left in those animals? No. Okay? So blood vessels, soft tissues, they don't last very long. Guess where we found these? These were found in dinosaur bones. Okay? So we can actually find blood vessels. We can find all kinds, 14 different types of molecules inside dinosaur bones. These are, more blood vessels. You got something called collagen, which makes up part of our bones. Okay, hair. Okay, the stuff that makes up hair and bones and that sort of thing are found commonly within dinosaur fossils. Okay, I also find something called carbon-14. Okay, which we know if you can find carbon-14 in a substance that's less than 60,000 years old. So. And nobody actually thought to start testing for that until recently because they just assumed that all these things were millions of years old. But it turned out, based on blood vessels, soft tissues, and carbon-14, they're much, much, much younger than that. All right? And look at what the scientist said. I actually highlighted this part. So it says, this finding could force scientists to reconsider how all the fossils were formed. Right? So this idea of millions of years is so ingrained, it's so indoctrinated into our thinking, right? That we would rather reinvent the laws of chemistry and physics and how fossils are formed rather than reconsider when they were formed. Okay? All right. Any questions on the possibility and the chance that the Earth is a lot younger than we think it is and that those rock layers don't represent millions of years? Yes? Oh, no question? Okay. All right. And lastly, I talked about, so we've gone over the layers, we've gone over how long they took to form. Let's talk about what they contain, okay? So who has seen this picture in their textbook? Yeah. So it's something called the geologic column, okay? And basically what this is the idea that, evolutionary idea that if we started as simple one-cell organisms, right, and became more and more complex, with time, all of those animals would be buried in rock layers stacked on top of one another. And the fossils that we find, if evolution were true, should follow this pattern of simple organisms to more complex organisms, okay? The problem with this is a drawing in textbooks and it's in all of them, okay? But it doesn't actually exist, okay? Dr. Woodmore-Rapp, okay? 85% of the Earth's surface does not even have 3 geologic periods appearing in correct consecutive order, okay? It's an overall exercise of special pleading and imagination, okay, for the evolutionary uniformitarian paradigm to maintain that there ever were geologic periods. Anyone ever heard that this might not actually be true? Right? Has anyone heard that even in this top layer up here, 95% of the fossils found in the top layer are actually these marine invertebrates? Has anyone ever been taught that? That's right, 95+% of fossils are these, right? So they don't draw them in the picture because it doesn't fit the story that they want to tell, but that's actually what you find, okay? Fossils like this, so trilobites, we actually still find them alive today, okay? This isn't an extinct species, okay? You can actually find them in every single layer and you can actually find them alive today. There's a fish called a coelacanth right here, okay? Again, find them swimming off the coast of Africa. It was discovered in like 1956, okay? Species that they thought were millions of years old and extinct, find them swimming off the coast of Africa, okay? So this idea that all these animals down here evolved to something else and became these later in time is actually not true. Does anyone know who this is? So Charles Darwin, that's right. And can someone in one sentence tell me why we know about Charles Darwin and what his theory says? Go ahead.
Oh, God is unnecessary for life, and everything is chance.
That's pretty darn good. That's better than what I would have said. That's right. So Charles Darwin came up with the theory of evolution, and what he said is that we all started as single one-celled organisms, okay? And then we gradually became more complex just by chance, okay? And over a long period of time, millions and millions of years, we went from one-celled organisms all the way to people, okay? By gradual progression, okay? So that is his theory. Okay, and he says if his theory is true, numberless intermediate varieties must have existed. And this makes sense, right? If we're gradually transitioning from one species to another, to another, to another, like if, let's just take monkeys to people, right? If monkeys were indeed evolving into people, we should have various stages of that development. Things that are, you know, a quarter man and three-quarter monkey, things that are half man, half monkey, all the way up, right? So if evolution were true, if things were truly evolving, we should be finding all of these intermediate species within the fossil layers. Darwin continues, okay? He says, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in the crust of the earth? Okay? Why is every geological formation not full of, why is not every geological formation and every stratum full of intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such graduated organic chain, and this is the greatest objection against my theory. He actually gave us the game plan of how to defeat his theory, right? And he knew at the time, he said, this is what I think happened, but I don't have any evidence to support it based on the fossils, right? There are no intermediates in the fossils that support my theory. Now he believed over the course of time, as we discovered more fossils, that we would eventually find those intermediates. More on that in a second. Has anyone seen this picture in their book before? Tell me what it is. Yeah?
The evolutionary tree of life.
It's the tree of life. Everyone heard of tree of life? Ben, the older guys, you've seen this before? Right? This is actually straight out of Darwin's book. Again, this idea that you started as simple creatures that got more complex, branched out and formed all kinds of different creatures in this basically continuum of increasing diversity on Earth, okay? So this is Darwin's theory, and if his theory is true, this is what we should find in the fossil record. This is what we actually find, okay? What we find is that the fossils appear suddenly, and they appear fully formed, and that all the species appear within a very narrow period of time. So basically, has anyone heard of the Cambrian explosion? Yeah, so the Cambrian explosion, okay, is a layer of rock where pretty much all of the animal types that we find today appeared suddenly. They appeared fully formed, okay, and you can find them in all the layers above it, okay? Which one of these drawings do you think appears in the textbook? This one, which is actually what we see, or this one, which is Darwin's tree of life? How come everyone knew this was a tree of life, nobody knew this was a Cambrian explosion, right? Because this is published, this is fact, but it's not published. Why? Because it doesn't support the idea of evolution. It supports, just like God said, animals reproducing after their own kind, right? So you have no transition from one species to another. Again, Field Museum. So this is actually from 40 years ago, so 160 years now after Darwin. Fossil record has been greatly expanded. We have 250,000 fossils, and the situation hasn't changed. So we have fewer examples of transition than we had in Darwin's time. So even the ones they thought were transitionary fossils at the time of Darwin have been shown to not actually be transitioning anywhere, okay? Fossil record does not convincingly document a single transition from one species to another, right? We have millions of types of creatures on Earth, and they're all supposedly descended from something else. We should see a transition somewhere, right? Maybe one, okay? We don't have a single definitive transitionary fossil anywhere in the entirety of the fossil record, anywhere on Earth. Anyone find that strange? It's the necessary part for Darwin's theory, and we have no evidence for it. All right, so just to kind of summarize, kind of what we know about dinosaurs. We know they existed, okay? We know they died and they were buried in the rock layers. The rest of it is mostly speculation, okay? Same with a lot of the other animals. All right, the rock layers, we know, they rapidly buried the fossils. We have deep canyons and an intricate worldwide, we have these deep canyons that most likely indicate not millions of years of sedimentation, but a worldwide catastrophe, very accurately described in Genesis 6 and 7 as the flood of Noah, okay? And again, no fossil evidence for species transition, and therefore no support for the theory of evolution in the fossil record whatsoever, okay? Is that different from what everyone's learning in school? Does that tell a different story?
No.
Okay. So yeah, you have to be very careful in school what they're teaching you, and you always want to ask, do they know that or do they think that, okay? Because if we didn't watch it happen, okay, then we're probably making guesses, okay? And the only one there from the beginning, again, was God, and he wrote it all down in the Bible for us, and it's there for us to find. And if you look at it through that lens, what you find out in nature actually makes more sense. We were hiking in South Valley 2 weekends ago. There's big red rocks with layers all over the place, right? If you look at it and say, oh, I bet those were formed in the flood, they all of a sudden make a lot more sense, okay? So I'm going to kind of open this up for questions. I listed on here, you'll have to come up and take a picture of that, but these are resources, okay? And this being a lecture for kids and millennials and younger, okay? I listed only websites, apps, okay, and movies, so no textbooks in here, okay? But yeah, so this one's creation.com, this one's Genesis Apologetics. They actually have an app that is fantastic. If you have questions about dinosaurs, rock layers, anything with evolution, genetics, you name it, Genesis Apologetics is a fantastic app. Actually, you can pull right up on your phone. It's free in the App Store. Highly recommended. ICR.org. This is a more technical website, okay? So if you're sort of a nerd like me and you like reading scientific papers, that's what this one is for. Answers in Genesis is more in lay terms, okay? Reasons for Hope is another very good website. They have their own app as well. They have a series of little videos called Debunked, which are great. Little 5-minute snippets about what you can, why evolution is not true and various sort of creation apologetics, okay? Also, these 3 movies I would highly recommend. The first one, God vs. Evolution, by Ray Waters and Living Waters Ministry. You can download that and stream it right off the web. Is Genesis History, was actually in theaters a couple of years ago, but it is a very well done documentary. And then this last one, if you want to know why schools are still teaching evolution and they sort of discount the theory of intelligent design, this is actually done by Ben Stein. It's called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. It's also, you can stream it free online, and it's very informative. All right. So if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to move on to something called vestigial structures, because this is what Ben told me they were teaching it in school. So please come up with questions so I don't have to keep talking about biology.
Just a quick question. Is this presentation available on the app?
I can have Dave email it out. We'll just put it in a PDF form and email it out to you.
Okay.
Anyone? Fossils, dinosaurs, rock layers, evolution? Anyone? Yes.
God created humans and dinosaurs on like the same day. Would the dinosaurs eat the first humans?
Right. So if you read Genesis chapter 1, okay, in verse 29, it says that all the dinosaurs and all the animals he first created were vegetarian. And it had to be this way. Why? Does anyone know why all the animals had to be vegetarian? Exactly. When did death come into the world?
Sin did.
After Adam and Eve ate the apple.
After Adam and Eve ate the apple, that's right. So there could be no death, i.e. no meat-eating dinosaurs, until after the fall, okay? And after they ate the apple, all right? So things can adapt and fill in that gap once there was death introduced into the world, but there was no death until after they ate the apple, okay?
evolution theory when there's no evidence?
So the question was, why do scientists still believe the theory of evolution when there's no evidence? And I honestly wish I had a good answer for you. I don't. The reason evolution was invented in the first place, and he actually touched on it, okay, was because people don't like the idea of God, okay? They don't want to have to answer to God. They don't want to have to follow his rules, okay? And therefore, evolution is really just a way to explain what we see in the world without there being a God, okay? So if you're trying to make up a story, but it's not the real story, right, frequently you run into problems, and that's where we are with evolution. There are lots of problems with the theory, but it's the only one out there that tries to explain the world without God being in charge of it. Okay? Yes. Yeah.
Why do we all still learn about evolution and know what it is?
The question is, why do we still learn about evolution and have to know what it is if there's no evidence? And like I said, it's the only, so this becomes more of a political question. The answer is, right, have you heard of the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights, right? There's no state-sponsored church, right? So some people have taken that to mean that you can't actually talk about God in church, which is not what it means at all. In public school, okay? So the flood explanation involves God, right? So some people think that you can't teach that because it involves God, and the state or government shouldn't be involved with God. That's another political discussion for another day, but that's why they are teaching evolution and not flood. Okay? Our area being taught that a age-old theory that vestigial structures, okay, vestigial meaning things that we don't think are needed anymore, okay, and as being proof for evolution, okay? So examples would be fetal gills, the appendix, the coccyx, okay? I will tell you the truth is that there are no vestigial structures, okay? Even though we can live without some organs doesn't mean they didn't have any function to begin with, okay? This is what you see in the textbook, okay? This idea that similarities among embryos suggest evolution from a common ancestor. This was a theory called ontogeny, recapitulates phylogeny. It was disproven years and years ago. Even Wikipedia actually says it's been disproven if you look it up. Okay? However, it persists in the textbook. Okay? It says that because the embryos of fish, reptiles, and birds all look similar, they had to have a common ancestor. Again, another textbook, presence of fish-like structures, shows these animals evolved from fish. Okay? These drawings were made by a man named Ernst Haeckel. He was a German anatomist in the mid-1800s, okay? And basically what he was trying to show is that all these embryos look the same, and then they became different things. People, pigs, chickens, fish, okay? And that, he said, was evidence for evolution. There's one problem with that. This is what the embryos actually looked like, okay? And this is what his drawings looked like. Anyone see a problem here? Yeah, there's a big difference between this and this, right? So it turns out Professor Haeckel was making some artistic freedoms, okay, in his drawings and making them look more alike than they actually were, okay? And somebody actually called him on it, and he was convicted, Jena University Court, and he confessed that he made up the drawings. They're not even real, okay? He was filling in and reconstructing the missing links, okay? And kids, you probably recognize this excuse, but he said, most everybody else is doing it, okay? That was his excuse, okay? So he was convicted in a court, lost his professorship in Germany 150 years ago. Guess what we still see in our textbooks? His drawings, okay? There's a book called The Myth of Creationism, okay? 115 years later, it uses the same drawings. They were made up, okay? 125 years later, biology concepts, same drawings. Okay, Hope biology, 126 years later, same drawings. 129 years later, AP biology, okay? And this was 2004, so now we're at about 160 years, or 145 years, okay? Still there, all right? Just to show you how silly, and the thing is they're holding on to these fake drawings to support a theory that we know doesn't even work, okay? What you become has nothing to do with what you look like as an embryo. It has everything to do with what your genetics tell you you're going to be, okay? These gill slits, or so-called gill slits in the human, are something called the branchial arches, okay? 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? This is color-coded. So branchial arch number 1 becomes 2 of the bones in your inner ear. Number 2 becomes the other 2 bones in your inner ear. The third one becomes something called the hyoid cartilage in the front of your throat, and the other one the thyroid and cricoid cartilage, again in the front of your throat. They're not even part of the respiratory system, okay? They never were gills. They don't have anything to do with breathing. Has no evidence for evolution, and it's everywhere in your textbook. So you have to be careful, all right? All right, so remember, not all folds in the neck are gills and useful for breathing, okay? All right, so back. Does anyone have questions? So we're going to add vestigial structures to that. Yes? So the question is why, if he was convicted of false drawings, are they still being published? I don't know. It's a good question. My guess is because it's parents like us who failed to call him on it, okay? If we don't demand, right, that our school teaches the truth, then we're probably not going to get it, right?
So is there any like biological evidence that has shown that like the appendix or the coccyx used to be a different size or that sort of thing, where that idea came from, or was it just?
So in different animals, no, because they'll say in different animals the appendix is bigger, okay? In humans, I will tell you, it is a lymphatic organ, okay? So it has a lot of your immune system for your gut, okay? So people without their appendix are more prone to infection than people who have had it, or who have their appendix, okay? So it is not a useless structure. You can live without it, but it definitely has a purpose. Same with the coccyx, okay? You have 17 muscles in your pelvis, okay? Women, unfortunately, are a lot more familiar with all of these muscles, and as they get stretched out and things don't work the way they used to, when you eliminate the attachment point for those muscles, that definitely has an effect. Okay? All right. Well, I will be up here for a little while longer if any of you have questions that you want to ask me. Certainly, you know, we're happy to, as long as you all keep learning things and you think that's useful, we're happy to keep broaching different topics. I think the age of the Earth is another one. Even evolutionists agree that evolution is a ridiculous theory if you don't have the millions to billions of years in order for those changes to occur. So that's one area we would definitely, you know, if you have questions about radiometric dating and that sort of thing, we're happy to address the age of the Earth as well. So anyway, thank you for coming, and I'll turn it back over to you.